VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk, coming your way from VCY America. Our topic today is going toward the matter of education. And ladies and gentlemen, major school districts around the country are reporting a decline in the number of students in their classrooms. The education website K through 12 Dive reported going into the current school year that school leaders are being forced to plan ahead for some tough decisions over staffing and school consolidations. They indicate that declining student enrollment is plaguing public schools at state and district levels nationwide, with the impact being felt from falling birth rates and expanding school choice programs. They reported, listen to this, just from a few of the areas in Wisconsin. Preliminary unaudited state data reveals that enrollment fell nearly 6%, or about 46,180 students. Over the past 15 years, Chicago public schools declined by 87,000 students, and since the last school year by over 9,000 students. According to them, Alabama marks the state's deepest enrollment drop in 40 years, and due to this decline, they're projecting that the district will need 500 to 700 fewer teachers by the 2026-2027 school year. So that begs the question, what's going on? According to our guest today, the exodus from government schools is heartening, and she says, we hope it accelerates. She says that government schools continue to fail our children. They do not deserve to stay in business. Joining us today, we welcome back Sheri Few. She is president and founder of United States Parents Involved in Education. It is their mission to end the U.S. Department of Education and all federal education mandates. She's a nationally recognized leader in education policy, served as the executive producer for the documentary film Truth and Lies in American Education. Sheri, welcome back here to Crosstalk.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you having me back.
So before we get into our main topic today, I'm guessing many listeners have never heard of United States Parents Involved in Education, or USPI. Give us a word about your organization.
All right. So USPI is a national nonprofit organization with the mission of closing the U.S. Department of Education and ending all federal education mandates, and thereby restoring local and parental control of education. And we chose that as our mission because we understand that the majority of the nefarious pedagogies originate with the federal government and are incentivized with federal funding.
And some of you may be scratching yourselves saying, what's wrong with the education system? Now, I'm going to play just two audio clips, and we'll have Sheri comment on these. But friends, to set the stage really for our topic today, the first audio clip is from Michigan, where the Interim State Superintendent, Sue Carnell, is being directly asked a question: how many genders are there? You're going to hear what transpires, but what you won't be able to see, you'll fail to see because I'm airing just the audio of this, is the blank stare on her face as she's being asked the question, like a deer caught in headlights. Let's listen in to her as she's asked this question.
How many genders are there? How many genders are there?
Different people have different beliefs on that.
Well, you can believe all you want, but science says there's two.
She's like a deer caught in headlights here, Sheri. I mean, this is the state's top educator. She's the interim right now, but the top educator cannot answer this question as to how many genders are there.
Yes, it's shocking. You know, it's reminiscent of the time that a Supreme Court justice, the candidate, was asked what a woman was. Can you define a woman? So it's very telling, of course, of the state of government schools today. So this liberal indoctrination that has been happening for some time has been fully exposed, and it's rampant all across the country. It's not just in blue states, it's in every state in our country.
And I want to point out, incidentally, now, again, she's the interim state superintendent in Michigan, And the Michigan State Board of Education just approved a new sex ed curricula for K through 12, which, according to the libs of TikTok, includes radical gender ideology, teaches that kids can be born in the wrong body. And so, Sheri, with somebody at the top of the educational system who's not able to answer how many genders there are, do we want them overseeing the sex ed curricula?
Oh, absolutely not. And it's no surprise to me that you're finding this type of curriculum in Michigan. And like I said, it's not just the blue states.
Yep.
Michigan struggles, might be a little purple. But in states like mine, in South Carolina, where I live, they have a sex education law that used to protect children from this type of information. And then it was challenged by an LGBTQ organization, went to the South Carolina Supreme Court, and they overturned the law that was protecting children. So now, at very young ages, they're teaching children, through storybooks and other things that are relevant to that age level, that they may not be the sex that they were born, the body that they were born into by God.
Well, the second clip I want to air, and final clip, is from a speech that was delivered by Stacy Davis Gates. She is president of the Chicago Teachers Union, and as of October, also is president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers. And I'd like you to listen to what she had to say in an address.
Baldwin says the children are always ours.
Always. Always.
Every single one of them, all over the globe. And what comes next is, CTU thinks your children are its children. Yes, we do. We do. We do. CTU thinks all children belong to it, and there's socialist conspiracy ideology. Well, I don't know about all that, but we like children. We educate them, we nurture them, we protect them, we support them, we negotiate for them, we create space for them. We even have them in our homes.
Sheri, I'm going to stop there. But again, when she talked about CTU, I mean, she's referring to Chicago's Teachers Union. And we do believe that they are our children. And that's the mentality, is it not? That these children do not belong to the parents. They belong to them, the educators who are going to teach and nurture them according to the dictates, that are before them.
That's absolutely correct, and it's extremely unfortunate, but they are of the mindset that the children belong to them. And, it's not the first teachers union leader who has said something like that publicly. We know that the Biden administration said similar things. And we can even trace it back to Hillary Clinton's, idea that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And so, our response to that way back then was, no, Hillary, it takes parents, a mother and a father. And so this idea that somehow the children belong to the government, it's really a Marxist concept, and it's no surprise because our government school system is structured in a Marxist manner. It was the Prussian model that it was designed after with Horace Mann back in the mid-19th century. And ever since then, we should not be surprised as it continues to devolve into just an indoctrination center for the liberals to claim not only the minds of our children, but the future of this country.
Indeed. Now, friends, we're talking with Sheri Few, president and founder of the United States Parents Involved in Education. And Sheri, I know that there are many parents, and I'm going to say thankfully not all, but there are many that will just relinquish control of their children daily to the classroom, no questions asked, no involvement in the school, have no idea what's going on, never attend anything at the school. They have no idea what's being taught. They skip out of parent-teacher conferences. They're just glad someone else is watching their children for the next 7 to 8 hours. Again, that's the thought of many, not all, thankfully, but that's a pretty sad state of affairs, isn't it?
It's a very sad state of affairs, and unfortunately, in our country, we just have created a culture where parents are dependent on the government, and that's by intention. It's by design. That's exactly what those who want to control our country wanted when they instituted this type of a school system, an education system. So yes, it's parents. It's almost as though the government is raising their children, because children they have more waking hours in school than they do at home. They want them younger and younger, and they want year-round education. They've got after-school programs. So they'd love to get infants right out of the womb, I believe. And actually in South Carolina a few years ago, they were debating legislation that would create a database that began prenatally. They want to track our children from the time they are conceived until way up into the workforce. And it is a global design for pigeonholing individuals into jobs where the government dictates every area of their life. And ultimately, as I alluded to earlier, it's about changing our form of government. But that's where we need to take a paradigm shift in this country. Mm-hmm. We have to start understanding that it was a bad idea to ever have thought that the government should be raising our children. We fell into this, probably when you and I were in school. Everything seemed fine. In the 60s, things really changed. But it was really, it was beginning prior to that. But I know when I was growing up and I was in government schools, the parents trusted the government. They trusted the teachers, and they trusted that their children would get a good education. And it was through turning a blind eye, unfortunately, this was happening all along behind our backs. People, because they blindly trusted, didn't recognize what was happening. And it really wasn't until COVID when children were at home with their parents on their Chromebooks, and parents were able to see what they're learning, and then all of a sudden parents were outraged. And so it led up to this point. It was kind of the frog in the water thing, and now the water's boiling, and parents are pulling their kids out of government schools.
We're just a minute before the break, but you indicate that government schools are losing control. What do you mean by losing control?
Well, control of the minds of our children. Their enrollment is declining drastically, as you mentioned in the opening of the show. And, they're even trying to come up with new ways to try to sell the schools to parents now because they recognize that they are losing control.
Friends, we're talking with Sheri Few today, and we're talking about this matter. Government schools are losing control. Enrollment is plummeting. It's happening all across these United States, and many in the public school system just says, many will just attribute this to that there are less children today, but they don't account for the fact of what it is that they're indoctrinating children with. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're going to make excuses, just like the academic decline that we've seen. It was the worst ever when the scores came out last year. They've always tried to blame the recent years of academic decline on COVID. Well, it was long before COVID that the decline started in 1992 when they started the NAEP scores and started tracking. Mm-hmm. That's when the decline started. It's happened ever since.
Friends, we're going to take a quick break. Sheri Few is our guest, and they have just put out a report titled, Are Government Schools Redeemable? And we're going to have her talk about that report after the break. This is Crosstalk coming your way from the VCY American Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, were the Aborigines that were found in Australia a primitive culture?
No, they weren't, Chris. When the British got there, these people had a very intricate culture and language and art, and even their own brand of technology. For instance, Aboriginal stone knives dating from centuries ago had serrated cutting edges. These were only invented in Western culture after the Second World War. There was nothing at all primitive about these early cultures. All people descended from Noah and his family, and they were technical enough to build a huge ship. Cultures do degenerate when they adopt pagan thought, but are not primitive in any evolutionary sense, and that's the back to Genesis truth.
If you want to know more about the creation evolution issue, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. Back to Genesis is a production of the Institute for Creation Research. I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network. With us today is Sheri Few, president and founder of United States Parents Involved in Education. And Sheri, you have put out a report that is available on your website, but it's titled, Are Government Schools Redeemable? Tell us about the report.
Okay, so our leadership team has been discussing the issues that we cover in this report. You know, there's so many efforts to reform education. As most of us in the leadership roles have been involved with education policy for at least a couple of decades, and we've seen all of the attempts to try to fix the schools. And in our discussions, we realized it might be important to chronicle what it is that we found. And there are enough things that are so convoluted about the government education system that we thought it would be best to lay them out and discern whether or not it's worth the effort to try to reform them, or should we just simply be encouraging parents to get their kids out and think of alternative forms of education for their children.
You have a rather astonishing statistic from the Mood of the Nation survey. What did that reveal?
So the Mood of the Nation survey showed that I think it was, I don't have that statistic in front of me. I apologize. Mm-hmm. Is that straight from the report?
Yeah, it is from the report, and I'll see if I can find it here while we're talking on the program.
Is that parents, most adults, I think it is a shocking number, like a 70-something%.
Oh, yeah, here it is right now from the report, from the executive summary. The Mood of the Nation survey published February 5, 2025, found that 73% of the 1,005 adult respondents were dissatisfied with the quality of public education in the U.S., the highest dissatisfaction rate since the survey began in 2001.
Yes. And I'm really not shocked at that number, but I'm glad to see that someone has reported this and surveyed parents and other adults to find out how they feel about it. Because, you know, and the good thing is, and we talk about so much bad, Jim, but the really good thing for me, because I've been in education policy for so long, is that we are starting to see adults wake up to what's happening and show their disapproval. Yeah. So that's a very, very good statistic, and that's why we began the executive summary that way, so that people will understand it's not just a fringe group of individuals that are saying we need to reconsider whether or not government education is the best option. It is the consensus of the majority of Americans, and they didn't single out parents and they didn't single out conservatives. This was just a general survey. Yeah,
indeed. And I mean, how many of us have seen the clips of the so-called mama bears going before school board meetings and saying, I object?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the other good news that we're seeing is parents are speaking up. As you mentioned to me during the break, they're running for school board successfully. And so this is the kind of movement that's necessary. But unfortunately, and what we reveal in the report is that this is going to take time. It will, in the short term, it is not a good idea to have your children enrolled in government school. The obstacles are so large, and again, so convoluted. There's 5 issues that we discuss in the report that we lay out are problematic to any sort of reform. And this is why our conclusion in the report is that schools are not redeemable, at least, again, not in the short term. But the report doesn't leave it at that. In the end, we talk about people that are really serious about trying to improve government schools. There are some steps they can take, and we lay those out. But again, these things will take time. It will take acts of Congress, and we know that that's challenging, and that's why it's so important to restore parental and local control of education, because parents and community members are going to be far more effective influencing their local elected officials than they will be people in Washington, D.C. that represent them.
Yeah, our friend Tom DeWeese, I hear him right now saying local, you know, in all of this aspect. Matter of fact, there was legislation introduced April 7th of this year known as H.R. 2691. That would literally abolish the Department of Education, would it not?
Yes, and so There are a few bills that are being considered in Congress right now to fulfill the remainder of President Trump's executive order. You know, he issued a couple of executive orders on education, and one was to close the Department of Ed. And, you know, it's almost as though he picked it up from our talking points. He said he wanted to return parental and local control. So that executive order is in place. But, of course, it's going to take an act of Congress because the Department of Ed was established through a congressional act, and that's how it must be abolished. So this bill, H.R. 2691, sponsored by Congressman Moore of Alabama, is the bill that we support. There are a few other bills that are being considered, which we don't support for the simple reason that they just move the functions of the Department of Education into other agencies. So that doesn't end the federal intrusion. It does not restore local control. In fact, it might make it more difficult for those of us who follow education policy to actually see what's happening because it'll be dispersed among several different agencies. So the bills that want to do that, and by the way, that's modeled after Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. That's one of their points in that report, and that's their model that's been adopted by some of these other pieces of legislation. It's unfortunate that we have to be in disagreement with, the conservative think tank, Heritage Foundation. They've been around a long time and done a lot of good work, but we even met with them in 2018 when we developed a blueprint for how to close the Department of Education, and we discouraged that approach. Again, it's only going to make things more difficult, and it certainly won't restore parental and local control. And the federal government has no business in education. It is totally unconstitutional for the federal government to have any say in education, and so we have to pull back not only the Department of Ed, but several federal laws that are in place that mandate certain policies within states. And then they threaten to withhold funding if they don't comply. We've seen that time and time again, and that's why we just have to get rid of the federal involvement altogether. We have the blueprint for how to close U.S. Ed, and we also have a blueprint for how states can wean themselves off the federal government, a plan for states that don't want to be controlled by the federal government. And the first step in that is to do a cost of compliance study, because we think that once a state reviews what it costs for them to comply with the federal mandate, the small percentage of funding they're receiving will be whittled away as far as benefit to the state. Because right now, most people don't understand that most states, on average, only gain about 10% of their education budget from the federal government. So it's certainly a doable task and what we encourage. So
the legislation that would do away entirely with the Department of Education is H.R. 2691. And friends, you can express your thoughts on this legislation to your member of the House at 202-225-3121. That's 202-225-3121. You can also get through at 202-224-3121. Sheri, do you believe that there's a will in Congress to do this, to get rid of this Department of Education? I mean, it was during the Carter administration that it was put into being. Is there a will to do away with it?
Well, I think there's certainly a will among the American people. And that is why President Trump ran. That was part of his platform. That's why he quickly issued an executive order to do what he could within the executive branch. It is certainly the will of the people, and we have some congressmen that are trying to, I think, sincerely make an effort at this. So the reason that we support 2691 is because it returns funding back to the states in the form of block grants. And what we would recommend, if the bill comes out of committee and it hits the floor, we would recommend a friendly amendment to the bill that of the money that goes back to states, a portion of that would go to the parents, directly to parents that don't have children enrolled in government schools. And thereby they would have more of their own money to make alternative choices for their children. So this is very different than the voucher schemes that we hear so much about that they call school choice. School choice is a really bad idea because that puts government money into private and home education, which will ultimately allow them to control those modes of education as well. Those are the only areas of education that they don't currently control, and they would definitely like to control those. So it's really a bad idea. Many states have adopted school choice legislation, but what we're recommending is more of a tax credit approach where parents get to keep more of their own money in order to make a better choice for their children.
Let me ask you this, and I'm looking at your report now, Are Government Schools Redeemable? You point out that the Founding Fathers identified no constitutional role for government in education, and yet we see the federal government has been firmly entrenched in education.
Yes, and that's a big problem, and that's why we chose that as our mission. You know, there is so much that needs to happen to improve education in our country, but we have to start at the top, where the biggest problem is, where everything is driven from, and that is from the federal government. And again, as you pointed out, it's only been in existence since 1979 under the Carter administration, and Ronald Reagan actually vowed to close the Department of Ed. Unfortunately, he was not successful in doing that. And I can tell you, because I've been involved with politics most of my adult life, and it is a common campaign strategy, you know, part of a candidate's platform to claim they want to close the Department of Ed. It makes a great line. But to actually have the will and the courage to get in there and do it is different. But we are seeing, I think it's the perfect storm. I think everything is coming together in our country right now is regarding education, with the very liberal indoctrination we see being exposed every day across the country. Parents are fed up. They're starting to realize they're paying through the nose for education. It is just so outrageous how much money we spend in this country on education, and people are fed up. So it is time. I think that it is very possible that we could see legislation passed to close the Department of Education.
There is another important question on this matter, and that is, who is teaching the teachers? And you're concerned by what you call the dumbing down teacher preparation. Share your concern, if you would.
Okay, so the teachers' colleges in our colleges and universities is the most liberal discipline of all. And so we have young teachers coming out of high school, somewhat already indoctrinated from their K-12 experience. They're shuffled into these colleges of education, and they are doubled down with this indoctrination. And these young teachers who are impressionable aren't even taught, the basic techniques for how to teach children to read and to do higher math and sciences. The classics literature is removed from schools, and it's replaced with what they call informational text. All of that came along with the Common Core standards back in 2010.
I'll tell you what, we're going to break right here. We're going to pick up with this matter on who is teaching the teachers and the teaching colleges, what's going on with this. So, friends, we'll be back in 1 minute. We're talking with Sheri Few today, president and founder of United States Parents Involved in Education. The education system's in a mess. Never intended, the Founding Fathers never intended for the federal government to be engaged in education. We'll be back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
No matter what issues you experience in life, you will find help in the book of Psalms. The Psalms bring comfort to a hurting heart.
The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want.
As read by Brad Canterbury, VCY America is offering an audio CD, a complete reading of the book of Psalms, bringing hope in times of discouragement.
Why art thou cast down, O my soul? And why art thou disquieted within me? Hope in God.
The Psalms provide direction for daily living.
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path.
Good for yourself and to share with others. This 5-CD set is available for a donation of $20 by calling 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Sheri Few is with us today from US PI, that's the United States Parents Involved in Education. And we're discussing today government schools losing control as enrollment plummets. And Sheri, we were talking here just before that last break about the question of who is teaching the teachers. And a matter of fact, looking at your report, you point out that the teaching colleges that you were just starting to address has been pushing things like, critical theory, leftist activism, LGBTQ catechism, emphasis on racial and gender issues. And these things have been surfacing to the top in classrooms all across this nation.
That's right. So these teachers are being taught that this is proper, and in fact, they're being taught to embed these pedagogies because it's not a curriculum, it's not a textbook that you'll find in the classroom. Mm-hmm. It's a method of teaching that teachers are trained in where they can embed it in every subject at every grade level. So it's sort of a backdoor influence. And the saddest thing about it is these teachers come out of these colleges of education and are geared up to teach like this, and they believe they're doing the right thing. That's the problem with the whole indoctrination that we're trying to get across to people, is that children at very young ages are captured all these hours in the day in the classroom, all the way up through high school, and then go into the extremely liberal colleges and universities, and they come out socialist, communist, Marxist, walking away from their faith. I mean, the statistics on children that are able to maintain their faith in Christ through their college education is devastating. And so that's why we're trying to warn parents. And, on the national level, we're very concerned about, the tax money that's being spent on these topics. So the colleges of education are one of the 5 issues that we outline in our report are a serious problem. And we don't believe in the short term we can turn it around. A lot of the colleges and universities take state and federal funding, and so that is certainly one way that our elected officials can hold them accountable. Some states are trying. The president has even issued executive orders on the gender issues, and some of the boys and girls spaces, and the states are pushing back. Yeah. And California filed a counter lawsuit. So it's a huge challenge and something we're not sure we can surmount, and that's why we concluded in the report. That's one of the reasons we've decided that schools may not be redeemable, government schools.
All it takes, unless things are changed statutorily, all it's going to take is a change in president to issue different executive orders and put back, the trajectory that we were on during the Biden administration.
Exactly. So the Biden administration even changed the definition of sex in the Title IX regulations that they issued, trying to say that, all these different genders would be violated by Title IX if they weren't, given their rights. So, yes, it can change with a new administration. That's why it needs to be codified in law. And really, that's why it's time for us to start thinking out of the box and have a paradigm shift on what is best for the education of children in America, and we don't believe government education is the solution.
Give us your feedback on national standards or state standards as it pertains to education.
Well, we don't think that standards, even if they're well-written and age-appropriate, they're not good for children because children develop at different paces. So we give some examples in our report. One of them is children don't all learn to walk at the same time or even talk at the same time. But just because they're not speaking by age 2 doesn't mean they're broken and they're never going to talk. So to put children into a mold where they do everything at the same age, the same grade level, is just not consistent with the way children develop. So it's been a problem. Most people don't even think about the fact that we haven't always had standards and assessments. And so since we have, though, we've seen a problem. And I was actually interviewing someone on my podcast the other day. You're probably familiar with Israel Wayne.
Yes.
And He had a really profound perspective. I've heard Alex Newman talk about it before, too, and we mentioned Horace Mann in the beginning of our report. I think I talked about it briefly, how they adopted the Prussian model back in the mid-19th century. And so part of that model was that that's when they started segregating children by ages and grade levels. You remember the old one-room schoolhouse where all children just learned together, and the older children helped the younger children and that type of thing. And you weren't expected to do things at a certain age. And so that is actually a Marxist education model that was adopted in this country and has destroyed education. So standards and assessments are one of the 5 issues that we talk about in our report that are problematic, difficult to overcome, and another reason why we don't think that government schools are redeemable.
On this matter of standards, is Common Core a thing of the past? We don't hear those words very much, or is it just kind of rewrapped in a different type of wrapping and still ingrained into the education system?
Yes, that is another big problem. That's why we see the continued decline in academic scores. The Common Core standards have been in place since 2010, and they are alive and well in every state in the nation except for Florida. Florida, under Governor DeSantis, actually adopted some superior standards a few years ago, but every other state is still implementing them. Most states call them college and career ready standards. And in South Carolina, where I live, we fought hard for a couple of years to repeal the Common Core standards. We had good legislation. We had a lot of support for our bill. And then at the last minute, they amended the legislation to simply rebrand the standards. They put them out under a different name. We had them analyzed and found that they were, 95% aligned with Common Core with just a few tweaks, but just has a different name. And that's what happened all over the country.
Sheri, I'd like you also just to comment on the teachers' unions. I played a clip earlier on the program from Chicago, but there's a noticeable agenda that's coming out from the AFT, the NEA, of whom the vast majority of teachers have membership or affiliation with them. So comment on the teachers' unions. I know that's a concern as well.
Yes, so that's number 5 of the 5 issues. Not that it's the least. It could have been easily the first. But yes, teachers' unions are another major roadblock to improving education in our country. They extract money from teachers' paychecks. Some states it's not even consensual; it's just automatic. And then they take that money and they spend it on left-wing political organizations and left-leaning candidates. They spent over $43 million in 2 years combined, the two largest teachers' unions, the AFT and the NEA. $43.5 million went to left-wing political organizations, things like the Bill and Hillary and Chelsea Clinton Foundation and Building Back Together and Human Rights Campaign Foundation. All of these organizations, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, all of them extremely liberal, pushing the indoctrination in the schools that we disapprove of. And it's all about equity and inclusion, DEI. These are the things that they are funding, and they have a very heavy influence on Congress because of their donations to campaigns and funneling money to these organizations who also influence the Congress and their decisions.
Friends, our phone number to Crosstalk today is 800-733-9829. We'll take your questions for our guest today, Sheri Few, who is president and founder of the United States Parents Involved in Education. That's 800-733-9829. So, Sheri, your conclusion through your report is that really in the immediate future, as far as you can see, really, that not redeemable but it would be a very long, arduous process to make that happen.
That's correct. That is our conclusion, and we actually have conclusions in the end of the report that address each of the 5 issues, which is government involvement, colleges of education, teacher certification, standards and assessments, and teachers' unions. All of these together helped us to come up with our conclusion that they're not redeemable, at least not in the near future. And we closed the report with something that we like to tell people is that parents are the first best educators of their children, and it's not just a slogan or a throwaway campaign line. It's a fundamental law. Elected officials must embrace this truth, resist the temptation to govern education, and return control to the only people properly positioned to hold educators and the education system accountable, and of course, that is parents.
How is it that our listeners can get a copy of your report?
They can go to our website. It's USPIE, that's USPIE.org.
Okay, again, USPIE.org. We've got full lines. We're going to begin with Priscilla in New Jersey. Hi, Priscilla, you're on the air.
Yes, hello. Hi. Hello, I'm pleased that you took my call. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'd like to preface it by saying I am a devout Christian. I have, my affiliations are with churches as music directors and, singers, and I'm a singer, and I perform different places, but the church is my home. I just wanted to say that as a teacher, I am a retired teacher, and I'm calling to defend my profession because there are a lot of things that we have been held, and this may play along with you because I have been very upset when I've had to hold my own thoughts, my own convictions to myself because I have to teach within a curriculum.
Yeah.
Now, I don't always agree. I don't agree with that. I don't believe that that's even what free thinking is about. I think that you have to have children able to think for themselves. The problem that I see here is that I have in any one of my classrooms 34 children, 34 different beliefs. And I'm going to say that because the biggest problem I see here is parenting. You understand? Because when they come to us, they stay with us for the better part of the day. The better part of the day. They go, and I taught in high school, so they went from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher.
Right.
But I've also taught elementary school.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that there are things I really wanted to say that I could not say, but I think it's for the protection of all that comes into our schools. Everybody doesn't feel like I feel. I wish they did.
Yeah.
But they don't.
But Priscilla, and for instance, because we need we have a break coming up in 40 seconds, but your hands were tied, and do you understand the concern with, and you mentioned the curricula that you had to teach, the curricula?
I do.
Yeah.
But what I say is this, is that I think what they're trying to do, I don't believe the federal government should have as much influence as they have.
Yeah.
Because I hated Common Core. I can't tell you how much I hated it.
But that's what's there.
But I did have to respect that there were. I can't tell you how many different religions. I didn't agree with a lot of the poor kids who came. Well, I called them poor because their thinking in their homes was different from mine. I had to take into account that I live in a very tolerable country. That's why we're all here.
Thank you, Priscilla. I'm up against a break, and I'm going to have our guests respond after the break here with us. Thank you for your call from New Jersey. We'll be back in 1 minute, and Sheri Few is our guest here today on Crosstalk. Government schools are losing control as enrollment is plummeting, and we'll be back on response on that call here in just a moment. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewtube.com. Satan, as we know, tried to stop Jesus from becoming our sacrificial lamb. We see that in the scripture several times. And now Satan's trying to stop him from becoming our victorious king. Yes, the king is coming, and he'll rule for 1,000 years on earth during that millennial kingdom before the new heaven and the new earth is established. And there's a spiritual battle going, and it involves wiping out every last Jew on the planet. And isn't it interesting, as a Christian Zionist that believes in God's plan historically and biblically for the Jews, that Christian Zionists and dispensationalists who interpret the Bible correctly and with the same hermeneutical tools over and over are some of the most attacked people today, even on secular podcasts. Is it coincidental that Islam is rising while Christian persecution is rising, as well as the attack of Christians who defend the Jews? It's part of Satan's plan.
This is Crosstalk from VCY America, and Sheri Few is our guest today from the United States Parents Involved in Education. Again, their website, USPI.org. That's the acronym for their organization. So, Sheri, we had a former retired teacher now from New Jersey who called in saying, hey, I'm calling to defend my profession here. You heard what she had to say. What's your response?
Well, I feel for Priscilla, and I appreciate her calling in and, you know, her desire to defend her profession. I can understand how, you know, a career teacher would feel that way, and it's not the first time I've heard it, of course. But, you know, as far as all the different children having different beliefs and her having to adhere to that, you know, that's really fundamentally the problem. Is we're not supposed to be teaching religion in the schools. No one's saying that we need to teach our Christian faith in the school, but you know, teach the basics, teach reading and math and real literature. A classical education is what we would expect, and not all of this other nonsense, all the social emotional learning and the Common Core standards, which she herself said she hated. Mm-hmm. But did she say anything? Did she stand up? Did she say this is wrong? Because, you know, I thought of the saying, to say nothing in the face of evil is evil itself. And that's what we're dealing with in government schools. It is pure evil. It is toxic. It's a spiritual battle for the minds of our children. And I think that's why there's a teacher shortage in this country, because the good teachers are leaving the profession. They refuse to be a part of it. And I always defend parents. It's unfortunate. A lot of teachers try to say that it's a parenting issue. And I know there are parents that aren't perfect in this country, and some have become dependent on the government and taken advantage of that. But I believe every parent loves their child, and I don't think the blame should fall on parents.
Let's go to Terry in Cambridge, Wisconsin. You're on the air, Terry.
Yes. The thing that I'm in favor of, and I would say we got to close all these public schools down, because it is illegal, according to the Constitution, to even have public schools. It's even written in the Federalist Papers. Yes, as a former and retired constitutional attorney, that's what I would be saying right there. And defending anybody who wants to get, and just defend the private and public, not public schools, but to say close them down. That's my comment. Okay. I would have to say the former teacher, yes, I can understand what her concerns, but the wrong idea right there. And we got to get rid of the teachers' union. That is the real problem in America.
Thank you so much for your call here today. And, you know, she's defending the profession. You know, we need teachers. We need teachers. But what are we going to teach? Where are we going to teach? And those are important aspects to it as well. Sheri is calling from Phoenix, Arizona. Sheri, you're on the air.
Hi there. Thank you for VCY. Thank you for Straight Talk. And Sheri, thank you for being on here. I am totally in agreement with you, and I'm going to look up your address at USPI.org and see how I might get involved. I started homeschooling my children back in the 80s, and I didn't know anything about it. I just knew what God was telling me to do. And I started studying about the public schools, and it was horrendous even back then. And it's horrible. I kind of have to agree with Terry. They should be shut down.
Sheri, let me talk now to Sheri Few. You actually have chapters around the country, is that correct?
Yes, we do. And so, Sheri from Arizona, we welcome your involvement. So when you go to our website, you can go to the chapters page, and you can see, I don't think we have a chapter in Arizona. So we would be glad to talk with you about the possibility of forming a chapter there in your state. We would love to have your support. It's so important to have people in every state involved with our movement. We want to grow a grassroots army, because we've learned that when you go to Congress, and that's what it's going to take to shut these federal programs down, is an act of Congress, when you go to Congress, they're not interested in what you have to say unless you're a constituent. So that's why we need people all over the country. I look forward to your email when you sign up at our website.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and God bless you both.
Thank you for the call. Let's go next to Ron in Tri-Cities, Washington. Ron, you're on the air.
Yes, Mrs. Few, great to talk to you again. Thank you for being on Crosstalk. I just want to say I agree with you that they're irredeemable. I've seen, as a substitute teacher, some horrific things. All sorts of depraved philosophies are being promoted. I go to school board meetings, and I think one of the real villains are the preachers. You never see them. They never show up. They never say anything about it. It's almost like they're all a bunch of Reverend feel-goods.
Well, Ron, tell you what, I'm going to let you continue on, but in defense of pastors, and I have a close association with many, many are night and day working certainly in ministering to their congregation, and they need people like yourself, Ron, to go and attend and inform them what is taking place.
But I do, and I know some conservative people, Christian people,
sure.
And I go to the school board meeting. I'm the only one there to speak up.
Yeah.
And I work as a substitute teacher. They can come after me. They can run me out of the substitute teaching ranks.
Sure.
And then there'd be nobody. And these guys, they're supposed to be watchmen on the walls. They're supposed to be shepherds. They're letting the wolves devour our limbs.
Thank you, Ron. And again, thank you for the call and your thoughts there. Again, in defense of pastors, I know many that from early morning to late at night that they are engaged in ministering to the people of their church. And indeed, they need individuals like yourself to say, Pastor, are you aware of what's going on? Can I get up and inform our people here? Thank you. And a quick call from Michael in Dousman, Wisconsin. Michael, we're down to 30 seconds. Your question or comment.
Hey, Jim. Well, it just so happens that something's happening in my daughter's school right now that I need to bring awareness to. And she's been sent home with a book called The Wish Tree, Special Adult Edition. She's in 4K. And 4K, and this is catered to 8th grade to 12-year-olds. And we started reading it, and the book is about a tree that...
Tell you what, we're down to 4 seconds. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Sheri, but any quick comment you have?
I'm not familiar with that tree, but send me an email, Michael, at our website, uspie.org, and you and I can dialogue about it.
Thank you. Mike, I wish we had more time, but the theme music is closing here, and we've just plain run out. And friends, thank you so much for joining us here today on Crosstalk. Sheri, thank you for bringing so many issues to our attention today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim, and keep up the good work.
Great. And stay on the line here for just a moment, if you would. Again, friends, the website, uspie.org. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.